Well, good morning. Actually, it's good morning at this time, right? And my name is Damaris Thillet, Director of the Office of Worship. And I'm here with my dear colleague, Michelle Montez, who's going to be the moderator for this wonderful conversation with Father Clarence and Father Tim. So I hope this is helpful for all of you. We're going to have a great conversation with them. Thank you, Father Clarence and Father Tim,
You're welcome. Thank you. Yes.
Well, we have a chance to speak with our sacred pastors on a few things that I think might be some illuminating and kind of helpful directives on some of the challenges and maybe the opportunities that we see now as we begin once more to open up churches for after the COVID-19 statewide shelter in place. We know that churches were one of the first areas that were completely closed as directive of the Archbishop of Santa Fe, and now in compliance with the state directives, we have a 25% ability to kind of bring people back into the church. So our hope is that in this conversation, you can offer some insights and maybe some of the challenges that you have witnessed or that you're anticipating as you begin to welcome people back to the church proper. So with us again is Father Tim Martinez, who's the rector of the Franciscan Basilica, and of Father Clarence, who is
I'm Father Clarence Maes, pastor of Our Lady of Sorrows in Bernalillo.
Thank you, sir. So if we want to go ahead and offer us some insights to whatever you've kind of been experiencing as far as opening churches.
Father Tim, would you speak first since you have already opened? Thank you.
We've been open for 2 weeks, just for Sunday masses. We haven't started a daily mass program yet, but you know, for certainly for Sundays and Saturdays at both parishes. I'm actually pastor of 2 parishes, the Cathedral Basilica as well as Cristo Rey Parish. 2 weeks ago we opened the Cathedral for Mass. And last weekend, on Saturday evening, we opened Cristo Rey Parish. So those 2 parishes will be open next Sunday, tomorrow, or day after tomorrow, actually. So we had a lot of talk, actually, before the announcement was made. And then once the announcement was made, we sat down and we put down together some of the things that were important. The 25% is an interesting number. We sat down and we calculated out 25%, but then the directives that we got from the Archbishop said that we needed to be at a safe distance inside the cathedral and from one another. And because of that, we weren't able to fill our church with 25% of the people. We only can do about 15%. So we have to remember, I think that as we're doing this, that caution is very, very important. We chose the more cautious way of doing this, that people would be at safe distancing from one another inside the cathedral, and that they would be, we would do our best to maximize that number. So we have about 120, we have space for about 120, and we make reservations for about 100, because we've got good staff and volunteers that come and help us. So we need those extra seats for them to attend Mass as well. So we're working on a number of 100 in attendance at both Masses. It's a little bit less at Cristo Rey because it's a smaller space as well. But both of those parishes are now open. We felt it was important that people call in and make a reservation. We wanted to discuss with them over the phone all the things that they have to learn in order to come to Mass, and that was wear a mask at all times, check in at the desk, get your ticket, wait in line at the front door, be escorted to your seat, don't leave your seats, and then we'll probably talk a little bit later about communion and how we're supposed to do that. So I don't know what you're planning there, Clarence.
Again, this is Father Clarence. Today is May 29. We are going to be starting off with daily masses first. We did not feel we were quite ready to start with weekends. So we will be starting June 1 with our daily single mass. And again, we are taking reservations and letting them know that masks are required. We are limited in our numbers as well. We cannot do 25%. So we're about 15 to 18%. And we are including everyone is just another number. The priest is just another number of what we can accommodate. So, I mean, we never thought we would say that, but that's where we are. And we also are asking people to call in so that we can let them know what we're asking of them, requirements, safety measures. We're just in the process now of supplying safety posters supplied by, I think it's the CDC, just to have that available for people. We've removed all, unnecessary items, missalettes, candles, those kinds of things to minimize people's physical contact with objects. And that will help us in limiting what is required to be cleaned, if you will. But we're, again, that was our slowdown, if you will, was being able to have people trained to clean. It's going to be our staff. And also our training of ushers. We just completed that as of yesterday. So we're starting to take reservations, and we will be starting up on Monday, June 1.
Great.
One of the cautions that was given to us by one of our staff members who is trained in medical areas was the idea that we had to compete. And I think many pastors and parishes perhaps thought we had to get on board immediately. And as I shared that with our associate, parochial vicar, he made comments, but this is how I phrased it. We've been given the green light. We cannot remember where we've left our keys to the ignition. So we have to start up again and start from scratch. And so he says, he cautioned us and say, start slowly.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Are you continuing your live streaming? There's a number of parishes that have chosen to either live stream or to record and place on YouTube. Is that also part of what you're continuing to offer for your parishes?
I have not done live stream. Both Father and I are not that tech savvy. So we have not done that in our parish. And we don't know if we would, because that would require extra spacing for camera operator. I don't know. I do not know.
Mm-hmm. Damaris, can you give some insight on what parishes are doing that?
Yeah, and in the beginning of all this situation, the COVID-19, we sent a form to parishes just to receive that information. And we were able to obtain some of those. And we posted it into our webpage, the Archdiocesan webpage. So it would be very interesting just to do that again and to obtain an update on that, to see how many of the parishes are now doing. Maybe they're doing more live streaming, or maybe they're diminishing, now that we are opening the churches. But that's what we did from the Office of Worship, trying to compile all that information.
I know in my parish, there's a live stream that's happening within the church proper, and they can only hold about 70, but they are doing a live stream into the pastoral center, which is nice. I mean, if there's another location where there can be a spillover or other people come in, to have that available is also another possibility. Father Tim, you want to talk a little bit about what some of the challenges were for you in doing that?
Yeah, we're live streaming one Mass on Sunday. We felt that would be an appropriate way to do that, and we leave the file up even after the Mass is over, so people can tune in after Mass, later in the afternoon, all day long, in order to attend and pray with the community. Even though we're praying at different times, we're praying at the one event, even though the one event is already technically over. Mm-hmm. But I think that it's a unifier in many ways, and it's very important, particularly for those who cannot come to church. We don't have an overflow of requests, of people who want to come to Mass. And there's lots and lots of folks who have told us we're not ready. They're afraid of getting COVID. They may be immune compromised. I myself am immune compromised. I take a lot of precautions when I come to Mass, more than is required by the policy. But that's a lot of things that people are worried about. And so we're continuing to live stream the Mass, one Mass on Sunday morning. And it actually reaches, more people than normally come on regular Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's an important part of the outreach and ministry and prayer. It's a hopeful thing to a lot of people. One of the most commented on thing that we did was when the Archbishop was renewing the baptismal promises during the Easter Vigil. We walked out to the front doors of the cathedral and opened them, and he blessed the entire archdiocese. And people are still commenting on how important that was, how hopeful that was for people. And so it's in a very important outreach. And I know that, there are parishes that can't do it. And even when I'm there and I have to make a request for support, I don't make a request for support for the cathedral, the Cathedral Basilica, or for Cristo Rey Parish. I says, wherever you are, wherever your church is, support your church. Because I think that's also part of this COVID-19. Many churches are really suffering financially. And we're all suffering from not being able to get together. And so in many ways, that's just another opportunity for people to connect and be present. And for those who do come to Mass, that's been very, very important for them as well.
For those who have stayed away, what kind of assurance can you offer them? It's deep-seated in the laity, the view from the pew, to go to Mass every Sunday, to receive the sacrament, to be part of the community, to gather in that way. So,
yeah.
Well, what kind of, consejo, what kind of consolation can you offer those who really can't go, or who are afraid?
Well, I think that there's been a long tradition in our church of spiritual communion, and I think that that's important. That we pray a prayer of spiritual communion that is a very faithful declaration at communion time of proclaiming Jesus present to us and all of those other kinds of things. And I think that's important. The other thing that I would say is that every Mass is a hopeful situation. Mm-hmm. Every Mass is a proclamation of the resurrection of Jesus. Every Mass is saying to people that things have changed, but they're not going to go away. The church is not going to go away. We're still here praying. Mm-hmm. And I think all people are still here praying, whether we're scattered across the world or whatever we're doing.
One of the priests, I cannot recall who, mentioned that, he says, I'm celebrating Mass and the Mass is full. And people were shocked. He says, if you look at Father Tim's background, you see the number of saints and images that are present there. And as the church is full of the saints, it's full of the persons in purgatory in need of our prayers, if you will. And so spiritually, we are in communion with Jesus Christ and those connected to him. So we've tried to reassure people that we are praying for them, with them at that time. Another comment that was made at the beginning was that the one-time event, if you will, that's being streamed or rebroadcast. And many times that's what our Mass always has been, remembering the one-time event of the sacrifice of Jesus, his death, his resurrection, the one-time event being recounted every moment of every day at one part of the world. And so our spiritual communion takes place every moment, with that event somewhere in our hearts. Another thing to comment on, I've shared with individuals a little brief summary, a little homily, if you will, And I would get feedback from so many people. Well, I'm watching Mass from Rome. I'm watching Mass here. I'm watching Mass there. And you should check out that one. And I'm like, oh, yeah, there are many options for folks to make contact with that.
Absolutely.
Father Tim and Father Clarence, any ritual considerations you can share with us?
Go ahead, Clarence.
I'm just beginning to contemplate those things, with safety being a priority, if you will. So having ushers to welcome individuals one at a time, a la Walmart or whatever, and then walking them to their seats and letting them know that caution, that being cautious of contact with others. One thing that I'm thinking of, I have not done this, but it's difficult to speak, to pray with a mask on. And so I'm thinking of just telling people, remain seated throughout the service, even though it invites you to stand or kneel. And in your prayers, just do them quietly, because it is difficult to speak and breathe with a mask. So that's one thing. Communion, again, will be something we'll have to describe as they approach.
We've decided not to have diaconate liturgical ministry at this moment for the sake of safe distance, until we get to the point where we've got enough training of everybody to be aware of safe distance. So we're not using altar servers, we're not using deacons. The only person who's in the sanctuary when we have the live stream mass is the Archbishop and myself, and we maintain about 10 feet of distance between us at all times during the mass. The other thing that when I'm just present by myself, there's nobody else in the sanctuary, and the ambo is about 15 feet away. I'm lucky, we've got a lot of room. But I do think that obviously the sign of peace cannot be exchanged except visually. I think the challenge is how do you smile with just your eyes? How do you give the sign of peace with just your eyes? Most we can do is wave or blow a kiss without blowing, because we're not supposed to be breathing on one another. I think the ritual has stayed the same. There's just different things, like when the Archbishop and I can celebrate, I have my own chalice, I have my own host. I set it up on the side of the altar rather than right next to him. And I can celebrate from 10 feet behind him. The other thing that we're doing is with the cantors. The cantors can't sing in a mask. It's too very, very difficult. We're lucky enough that we're able to put the cantor, I guess it's almost, 40, almost 50 feet away from the first the first pew. So we're really lucky that we've got the room to be able to do that. So we have somebody playing the organ or the piano, one musician that way, and one cantor. That's the only music that we're able to provide. And when they're not, when the cantor's not singing, they put a mask on. Everybody wears a mask except for the presider and the priest. And even then, we're far enough away behind the altar, away from the front pew. I think we're like 45 feet away from the front pew. So we've got the distance in the cathedral. I think that communion is by far the biggest change that most people see. We don't give out communion on the tongue. We don't give out communion to anybody who will not follow that we're going to receive on the hand. As Justin Martyr says, 1,100 years ago, no, it's 1,900 years ago. He said, put your right hand under your left, make your body a throne for God. Receive communion like that. And then with the instruction of the bishop that just came out yesterday, people are then asked to immediately walk outside before they take communion, walk 15 feet away from the door, and then they can lift their mask and take communion. So communion will be outside now. people will receive at the door of the church, and then they will go outside. And of course, we've put little lines on the floor so people can keep safe distance as they come up. Our procession is not through the main body of the church. We actually come in from behind the altar, and we've got a giant sanctuary, so it actually looks like a little procession. Again, I think safe distance, safe things need to be considered very carefully, very, very carefully. And one of the reasons that we're asking people to call, and so we can talk to them about what they need to do at Mass, but the other reason is we want their names and phone numbers of everybody who's coming, so that if something should happen, if somebody gets diagnosed with COVID, they've been at Mass the day before or whatever, we can call people and tell them that they need to take the necessary measures because they have been exposed.
Well, that information would be very helpful as they do contact tracing. So once there's a positive, then the Department of Health does kind of concern themselves. It's good to know that you're taking every precaution for your own safety, simply because as the ministers, you're the ones that would have the highest likelihood of contamination or contracting. And so was there any special training that you had to provide for your ushers or for your Eucharistic ministers in particular?
We haven't started any training yet. We felt that we have enough staff that they're able to handle and take care of the 100 people. But my concern is continually exposing the same people to this 100 people. So the challenge that I've given to the staff is find volunteers below the age of 60 who are in good health, who don't have any, other things to worry about, who can start to be trained and walk along with us for a couple of weeks so that they can start taking over those things. And hopefully we'll be able to get a minister down to just once a month, maybe in ministry, so that they can only expose themselves once a month or so. My hope is that by the time they're trained, we won't have to do this anymore. So
I'd like to speak to some of the liturgical aspects also, because Sunday obligation has been dispensed, so there's no obligation to attend on Sunday Mass. In fact, it does not even have to be a Mass. It can be a different kind of service in the absence of a priest. And so, we have not moved in that direction, but I am open to considering that. Just the priest, again, not having to be present on that regular basis can be something to consider. We've had to rearrange our music space, if you will, because we've had to relocate or locate a collection box. Rather than taking a physical collection, there is a single location for depositing your contribution, and it happens to be right in that site where our choir was, just to have it more readily available. I have asked that we have, not even a cantor, because it's right there in that spot. And, thank you for sharing that it's difficult to sing with a mask. So that adds to that. And another thing I'd like to share is that, a couple of flu seasons ago, I mentioned to people that I am from northern New Mexico, and very often, we do not shake hands or blow a kiss or whatever it might be. And often we will greet each other with a orale. Hello, greetings.
Agree with your chin.
That was very hard for me, Father Clarence and Father Tim, and coming from the Caribbean. We were so used to hug, to kiss, and everything. So it has been very hard, for many of us. And when you were mentioning about the mask to sing, I experienced it for the first time at the diaconal ordination. So it was very challenging. And to remember just to remove my mask and then put it back again, it was hard. So one of the, when you were mentioning about music, we might be thinking, why we're not singing? Why the assembly is not allowed to sing? But there's a reason why. We're trying to protect the people, people's eyes. So it's a very good example. And even just not singing the parts of the Mass, it was long enough and to have the mask on and to breathe well. So we need to to consider those aspects. Thank you for sharing that. Maybe one of the things I observed at the diaconal ordination was people, when they were trying to receive the Holy Communion, it was hard to get used to the taking of the mask. Can you talk a little bit about that? What is, what is the...
I think the original recommendation or guideline was to say that you would remove your mask with your hand ready and then receive and consume. That has changed now. So again, as Father Tim mentioned, that you will receive communion with your mask in your hand, and then you will step a safe distance away, remove your mask, and then consume. So it's changed as of yesterday. So
one of the concerns is that, I was wearing one of those simple masks, blue masks, and so it was fairly simple to kind of open the mask and place that in my tongue, on my tongue. But for those who have tied masks or masks that are tied on two different ends, yeah, I mean, you could hang yourself with that mask before you get it off, and so you're kind of fumbling. So the concern was that there wouldn't be kind of a hot spot there. Suddenly everybody's trying to figure out how to get their mask on and off. And so the hope was that, as you move out of that environment and into the open air, it would be a little bit easier to get that mask on, but to get that mask off and then put it back on again. And then you would minimize, exposure to droplets or somebody standing behind you, or even the Eucharistic minister in front of you. So that's the other concern, that we're trying to safeguard all of these individuals that increase exponentially as that line backs up. So that was one of the concerns that I experienced when I received communion. And the other is just the wearing of that mask. About 30 minutes, 35 minutes, your breathing is still okay, but beyond that, it does become even sedentary, even sitting. It becomes very difficult to keep a mask on. And so for some who might not have any evident health problems, but who have made it to Mass, I saw a few people kind of drooping as they got to the 45-minute and the 50-minute and the 1 hour mark. So it's a good idea to, I think some of the recommendations that came from the Archbishop yesterday was to limit the homily, to limit, not to use the longer Eucharistic prayers, to kind of remember that the longer people are in an environment, the greater the chance of exposure, and that includes the pastor. So, it's everybody, safety seems to be the key. Every pastor that I've spoken with, that's been one of their greatest concerns. It's the primary concern. The Eucharist is applicable for all people, all times, in all situations. It's something that will, give us life, and we need this. It's the source and summit of who we are. But first and foremost, how that is celebrated, safety has become the primary concern for everyone. And it's wonderful to see that and to hear that and to know that as a person who sits in the pew. So thank you very much, both of you.
I'd like just to add another note on safety. If sitting for a long time with the mask is difficult, one of the dangers, not a danger, but something to be aware of, is people will tend to touch their mask more to adjust for their breathing. And that is also a concern. So the less that, that causes that is best. Shortening service time and limited breathing and singing, all of those are very wonderful things.
And I would recommend that that you bring your little handy wipes for yourself as well. If you have any concern that things are not kind of pristine around you, for heaven's sakes, take some responsibility for yourself and bring in a little handy wipe things down while you're sitting there, and before you receive communion. Usually, that I know of, most places are providing that hand sanitizer for you to utilize that before you receive. So, but if not, take some of your own precautions and bring some of those items with you.
And people have been doing that. I'm really happy. We've seen that. They bring their own, and even though we tell them we've cleaned, not that it's perfection, nothing's perfect, but I'm glad that people are taking that responsibility as well and saying, I'm going to add another measure here. And it's a really good thing. Talk about respect for life. That's what we're really talking about. respecting the lives of the people who are around us. That's a wonderful sign of it during this time.
Damaris?
Yes. Any additional sacramental considerations when it comes to baptisms, funerals, and weddings? And also, I have been receiving a lot of emails about the celebration of the third scrutiny for RCIA. So, any insights from that, Father Clarence and Father Tim?
I'll be honest. We have not sat down around the table and even thought about doing that yet. You know, we're just getting settled in, I think, with what we're doing with Mass, and so I think those things are going to be at least a month away.
Okay.
We've got a couple of weddings scheduled. We'll deal with those as we get to them in June. August is going to be the heavy time for weddings, because people rescheduled their weddings from this time to August. So we'll be working on that probably in the next 3 weeks.
Father Tim, I am so glad to hear that, because I'm thinking everyone is doing everything already. Okay, so we got to catch up. I got to slow down. And that's a reminder to me that, you know, we have just started to discuss confirmations and scheduling and first communions and scheduling. And we have not really figured out those things yet. We haven't even started Mass. So that's a wonderful question and a wonderful response to say we haven't had that discussion.
We're on our way, but we're not there yet.
And it's good to hear this. No rush, you know.
Well, the other is the temptation, because the catechetical preparation was pretty much interrupted, you know, put to a screeching halt in February. For many of us, we moved to Zoom platforms and continued the formation in that way. Some with smaller groups of kids or with smaller groups of individuals. I know for my RCIA process that I help with at Nativity, we moved to a Zoom platform. We've been meeting regularly on that for a while, but many people are not familiar with the technology or couldn't join, or so that throughout the diocese, that wasn't necessarily a way in which we could address it uniformly. But the temptation at this point is to say to confirmand, in particular, the confirmandi in particular, well, you haven't finished your formation. You're not ready. You're not this. You're not that. And I think we need to be careful pastorally from making determinations like we didn't pass the test. And you know, the hope is that we have been working in a very compassionate and pastoral way, understanding the difficulties that this has caused for everyone. And the hope is that the church would respond in that way too. Absolutely. So what are your insights on this, Father? So where are you moving with your young people?
Well, I have been sharing with the adults that I've been encountering and saying, yeah, I'm not worried about the lessons that were skipped or whatever. We did try to provide materials, but I'm telling individuals, I say, the lessons that we are learning now will never be learned from any book. Basically, the lessons of life and family and values of individual safety, you will never learn from a book, meaning they have learned lots now.
That is so
absolutely true. Absolutely. We send stuff home, and hopefully people, you know, I think people are using them, but I don't think that you know, we can't sum up in all of those lessons everything that a Christian needs. Christians learn from life. They learn from experience, and certainly that is going on. I've talked to some of the people that are getting ready for sacraments. They're ready. They're ready now. And my own disappointment is that we're not, you know, as a church, ready for them. So, you know, give us some more time. We'll get there. But I do think the people I've talked to are ready.
Ecclesia suppla, the church supply.
Absolutely.
Well, and then you're right, Father Clarence, especially if they're moving towards the common good, they have a greater awareness of their responsibility as baptized Christians in the world, as you know, and that's and certainly within their family structures and all the challenges that they've had in making these adjustments. We are living definitely through somebody's history lesson. And hopefully there'll be some real things that will be indelible for them, as indelible as the sacraments in this experience. So
Absolutely.
thank you for that insight. I think that's marvelous. Any other insights on, some of the things that you would anticipate, or if you could offer a message to the people? Like we said, we're ladies, so we always talk about the view from the pew. We know what that looks like from that side. So if there's any kind of consejos or insights or ideas that you would like for us to be aware of as this exponentially opens, as this experience becomes more different each time.
Caution. And yes, we're doing our part, and we are perhaps not where everybody thinks we might want to be, which is so good for me to hear, because I'm like, where do I need to be? And so knowing that we are gradually moving together, if you will. Yeah.
Very good. Father Tim?
I don't know, when I was first ordained, I remember thinking, who would want to celebrate Mass by themselves? And here I am celebrating Mass with a camera in front of me for 8 weeks now. But it has strengthened my awareness that the church is bigger than just this place. And it's more than just this place. It's more than just what I do. And the beauty of masked people sitting in the pews out of respect for one another is absolutely amazing. And I think the word right now is persevere. Persevere in your care for one another, because that's what this is all about.
Well, and what's marvelous about all of this is we saw a declaration that said, churches are to be opened. They were saying churches need to be open. They need to be open at 100%. They need to be open. But when you think about our experience here in the Archdiocese of Santa Fe, the church was never really closed. Maybe the building was not accessible, but sacraments still continued. Community still continued. We moved to different platforms. The gospel was still proclaimed. And for us, I think that's a marvelous part of our heritage, particularly in the Archdiocese of Santa Fe, that we have always kind of figured out a way to offer the good news of Jesus Christ. So in that respect, we were never really closed. We just had different ways in which we celebrated or participated. But service still, confession still occurred, anointings still happened. What are some of the things that, around those sacramental experiences that you've had, the pleasure of being part of, and what are some of the things that you would like us to know about as we move in those ways?
Well, learning the lessons of our gospel message, it's what the Archbishop has stated. I don't have the right phraseology, but home is what? Holiness is at home, or what is that motto?
Home is the holy place for Holy Week.
Holy Week. But, okay, well, let me say this then. Charity begins at home, okay? Or what Jesus says, love one another as you love yourself. You must have this person in mind and thinking of charity. It must start here. And if you cannot love yourself, well, he says it's even harder. Love others as I have loved you. So again, preciousness of life begins here in this temple, in this home. Then we can begin to live that gradually with those around us and beyond. So that is a wonderful lesson that we're going back to, the home, the self, the temple of ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm good at fortune cookies, I guess.
That's marvelous. I'll let the Archbishop know that you caught on to that home is a holy place thing. That's great.
I just want to add, you reflect the wonderful communication you keep with your community of faith, which is very important. Communication is the key. You need to keep communicating with them, contacting them, and guiding them, through this process. This is a day-by-day thing, and we need to keep, evaluating this and analyzing this to serve better the people of God. So communication that you can tell you guys have been doing, an excellent job on that. Thank you.
And I would thank you as well, because even though you as laypersons are, offering that perspective, please be cautious in your own professional roles as well. Don't feel like you have to solve every problem out there because whatever. We're offering caution for yourselves and consolation to you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Is there anything else? Any other item, Damaris? Anything else that you'd like to be sure we bring up and discuss?
No, I just to inform the Office of Worship is going to start doing weekly updates. We're going to keep doing updates to the Office of Worship. I hope that will be helpful for the community of faith here in the Archdiocese of Santa Fe. I want to say thank you for your pastoral care, with the people of God. And Michelle, thank you for all you do too, with, through the pastoral ministries in the Archdiocese and all you do. So it's a blessing. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Thank you for all you do. Thank you.